Welcome to the Joy of Cruising podcast with your host, award-winning author Paul C. Thornton, a weekly conversation with the amazing cruisers featured in the Joy of Cruising trilogy, comprised of The Joy of Cruising, Cruising Interrupted, and new release, The Joy of Cruising Again. Each book is a compilation of features about cruisers and cruise and travel personalities from around the world. It's the next best thing to cruising, hearing about cruising from the unique and diverse perspectives of Paul's amazing guests.
Hello, passionate cruisers. I am delighted to welcome Doris, Vasconcellos-Bernstein, and Doug Bernstein this week on the Joy of Cruising podcast. I wrote about the Florida couple in my second cruising book, Cruising Interrupted, in a feature called Trapped in Paradise. Interestingly, when I set out to write the follow-up to The Joy of Cruising, which was originally titled More Joy of Cruising, I neither knew Doris and Doug, nor was I likely to learn of them. Not that they weren't the kind of passionate cruisers I enjoyed interviewing and emulating, as Doris and Doug have sailed to destinations and on vessels that are bucket list items for me. I like to tell stories representing cruising in all its diversity. Cruise lines, types of vessels, and destinations. So they would have been a good fit in the book had I known of them. Halfway through the book's completion, the world drastically changed. Nations worldwide struggled with the health care and economic consequences of the pandemic. Cruising was suspended. Writing of More Joy of Cruising, now titled Cruising Interrupted, was likewise stopped, pending cruising's return. Living in Florida at the time, I read a compelling human interest story early in the shutdown in the local newspaper about a Florida couple, the Bernsteins, who found themselves trapped on a cruise ship in Brazil. The newspaper had found out from the couple's friends about their plight and was able to contact the couple on the ship and conduct an interview. Fascinated both by the circumstances, the Bernsteins were forced to quarantine due to COVID in a suite on a luxury vessel, and the glass half full outlook the couple exuded, I knew that I wanted to reach out to Doris and Doug, and I am so glad that I did. I imagine that for some cruisers, the notion of living the life on the ocean, being personally served virtually around the clock, filet mignon, lobster, and chocolate-covered strawberries, drinking martinis, fine wine, and champagne, relaxing and luxuriating in suite accommodations with an unparalleled view of the ocean from your veranda on a 6-star cruise line is an occasional fantasy. A relatively small percentage of cruisers get to experience some aspect of this on luxury cruises. That fantasy was Doris and Doug's experience around the clock for 12 straight days. It sounds glorious, except they had no input to this real-life fantasy, except whether to order lemongrass, beef nam top noir, or lobster thermidor, or milk-fed veal escalope. And it took place at a time that outside of Doris and Doug's suite on Silver Sea Cruises' Silver Shadow, from which they could not leave, the world was grappling with a raging pandemic. Cruising Interrupted was released at the height of the cruise lockdown, and it was fitting to tell Doris and Doug's story, which was titled Trapped in Paradise. Today, I am mainly interested in the wonderful destinations and vessels they cruise. As I said many times, a side benefit of writing the Joy of Cruising books and hosting the Joy of Cruising podcast is living vicariously through the passionate cruisers I get to interview, and I long to cruise like Doris and Doug. Besides avid cruisers, Doris and Doug are both esteemed scholars, speakers, authors, and researchers specializing in psychology with courtesy professorships at the University of South Florida. Doris and Doug, good to see you again. Welcome to the Joy of Cruising podcast.
Nice to be with you, Paul.
Nice to be with you.
So how you both doing?
Very well. Enjoying retirement. My husband doesn't stop. He is working. He's working.
So are you still affiliated with the University of South Florida?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll chat about that a little bit. First, I shared a little bit about how we met. but I didn't talk much about your very impressive bios. So fill our listeners in on some details: where you're from, where you live, your professional background, anything you're willing to share.
You go first.
Okay. I was born in Brazil, and I went to France to do a PhD. I got a business next year in the Sorbonne, and I stayed there. I mean, it was the first thesis on the subject. So I worked there until I met my husband, who was in America, of course, and then I came here.
Okay.
And my story is much more simple. I was born in Pittsburgh. I went to the University of Pittsburgh and then to Northwestern University for my PhD. And then I was a professor at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana for 30 years, and then retired in 1998. But as Doris says, I'm still working on various projects. And we for up until a year ago, Doris was still teaching some courses over in Paris for health professionals. And so a big part of why we travel so much is that we had been going over there ever since we met in 2006. We've been spending at least 3 or 4 months in Europe. So now Doris has officially retired and she's not teaching anymore. So we go over now just for enjoyment mainly.
No, this stops.
Well, I'm running a conference there every 2 years. Yeah, that's true.
Well, since we last spoke, I finally got a chance to experience France. I went on a Mediterranean cruise, and it stopped in a couple of places in France. And the other thing that you might be proud of me for is, even though I went to France, I've never experienced Paris. And so in August of 24, we're going on a river cruise, our first river cruise. And at the tail end of the river cruise, included in the itinerary is a high-speed train ride to Paris. And then we stay 3 more nights in Paris. So,
wonderful.
Good.
yes. I bet you've been on river cruises, right?
We
Just
have
one.
one, yeah.
Just
Viking,
a Viking? Okay.
You were on a Viking cruise.
from Budapest to Passau.
Passau,
Yeah.
on the Danube. Yeah.
Well, Viking is still on my bucket list, although I have my eyes on it's a Viking Ocean cruise in 2025 to Vietnam and some places around there. But right now, it's still on the wish list. So,
Right.
so I when I reached out to you a couple of months ago, you were about to embark on another wonderful cruise. Say something about. I assume that's your last cruise. I don't assume you've gone on 2 since we spoke just a couple of months ago. Talk about that cruise.
Well, I think if you're referring, if we talked back in March, that was in the spring.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
We left from Fort Lauderdale on a Silversea cruise to Lisbon. And I should say that one of the reasons we do transatlantic cruises pretty much every year, because we like to say it's our bus to work. Because when Doris was teaching in Paris, that this was how we got over there.
Or
came back. So this past March, we cruised to Lisbon. And then because we had so much cruise credit from the canceled cruise back in 2020, we were able to book a second cruise, this time from Lisbon to Rome a week later. So in other words, we arrived in Lisbon on one day, and then a week after that, we boarded a second Silversea cruise to go to Rome. So we have been on 2 cruises since we talked to you last.
you guys are one of my cruise mentors. So I also, you'll be proud of me for this. I'll also be doing my first
Oh,
transatlantic.
great.
Oh,
Uh,
that's good.
that's in April, and it's going to Portugal.
Mhm,
So
Great. Which
Portugal.
which
Yeah.
cruise line will you be on?
it'll also be my first time on Virgin
Oh, we've
Voyages.
not
Mm,
been on that one. That's supposed to be very good.
mhm.
Yeah, they're supposed to have really great food, and it starts off with what starts off with 8 sea days. So I suspect I'm going to gain eight
Yes.
Yeah.
pounds
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
because I'm trying
Oh, good for
everything.
you.
So tell our listeners about Silver Sea Cruises. You just went on that, and that also was the cruise. A Silver Seas cruise is how I
Yeah,
met you. So talk a little bit about Silver Seas Cruise. You seem to like that line.
we do.
We do. And I think they get a hold of us because of the COVID, because we spent 12 days in a port in Brazil. We are going to do the same
Hmm.
cruise next year.
Yeah.
And they got a hold of us. They gave us 130%.
Yeah, they
They
really,
gave so much that we just stayed with them.
yeah, that's why we
Hmm.
continued booking with them. With regard to the cruise line itself, reason that we like it so much is it really is very upscale in terms of the facilities and the service. The staff to passenger ratio is very good. It's an all-inclusive cruise, which we like very much. And it may seem a little bit expensive, but when you look at what's included and how you might have to pay for those things on other cruise lines, the difference is not as great as you might think. The ships are small. They're around I think 800 or 900, and so you feel it's never crowded.
So you alluded to that those 12 days in Brazil, and that's what I wrote about when I met you several years ago, and I called it "Trapped in Paradise." But before I asked you to talk about those 12 days, let me tell the listeners how I learned of you. You were living in South Florida, as I was at the time, and I think it was Naples Daily News. I was just casually reading the paper and whining about how long it's going to be before cruising gets back. And I read about this couple who were essentially trapped in paradise. And the way the newspaper wrote the article, apparently some friends or neighbors or whatever of yours had been in touch with you on the ship and had gotten in touch with the newspaper, and the newspaper conducted an interview of you on the ship, and I read that interview, and
Yeah.
I was just mesmerized. It was just it's a story that can only happen. I don't want to be hyperbolic, but once in a lifetime, because the pandemic was a once in a lifetime.
I hope so. I hope so.
We
Yeah,
hope it's one.
a once in a 100-year event.
We don't want it to do it again.
So tell the listeners what we're talking about. Talk about the unfortunate circumstance of the Silver Shadow cruise in 2020, and you can start from the beginning when it wasn't so unfortunate, when everything was wonderful.
Yeah.
we got into the ship in Rio, and we went outside the Brazil up.
On the coast. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We saw my brother in Bahia. My brother lives there.
Uh-huh.
And then we stayed 12 days in Recife.
We got to Recife, and that was when we were supposed to leave the next day, but a passenger got sick, and it turned out to be COVID, and they took him off the ship along with his wife but the Brazilian authorities weren't willing to release us. But they also weren't willing to let us get off. They wouldn't let us go, and they wouldn't let us come ashore. And so we were kind of stuck there. Each day we were told maybe it'll be tomorrow that we can leave, or maybe it'll be tomorrow that you can fly home. And it was just every day was maybe tomorrow. And it was, I have to say that it sounds like you were trapped, but in a way it was beautiful. It was beautiful. We were fortunate enough that our side of the ship faced the ocean.
Yeah.
Rather than
that's a big difference.
Yeah. Because the port of Recife is not beautiful. And so you don't really want to be looking at it for 12 days. And the ship became somewhat of a news item in the local area. And there were lots of small boats full of drunken teenagers who all around the boat, yelling, playing music, waving at us, and
drinking.
A lot of drinking, yeah. And our accommodation was big enough that we could work out inside the suite. We had a balcony so we could sit outside, and we had,
but not outside in the area, in the common areas. No,
we couldn't leave the suite. We had to stay inside.
Yeah, and they wouldn't come inside. They would give us everything, towels and food in the door. Not come in.
Dressed in
hazmat suits.
Hazmat from head to toe. And I do have, I'm sure the cruise line wouldn't like that, but I do have a photo of you all being served by a hazmated gentleman. And, I'll use that to promote this episode. But I will tell you, just as you described, how it was wonderful, or kind of wonderful at first, in the book, when I first introduced your story, I said, imagine, having this view from your stateroom and being served nonstop champagne and filet. I made it what it sounded like is a fantasy, something that I would love to go on a cruise to nowhere on a luxury vessel and just eat and drink and I remember you said you could watch any movies you wanted. So it sounded wonderful, but that's because, you guys made the best of a bad situation. Plus, you on a luxurious ship. Talk about, when did you know something wasn't right?
In the boat.
Yeah. How did you know? When did you get the sense that you guys weren't leaving? What do you call it? Is it how do you say it? Recipe?
Recife. Mm-hmm. I think what happened was we had docked in Recife, and we had dinner that night, I believe. And then I believe if I recall correctly, there was an announcement from the captain. Every day he would. But the first day, I think there was an announcement that our departure was going to be delayed because of a passenger who was sick. Mm-hmm. And I don't think they ever mentioned COVID, at least not at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And at first they allowed us to come out onto the open decks, like the even numbered decks would be out on a certain hours, and then the odd numbered decks could walk on the open decks at a different time. Mm-hmm. But that only lasted, I think, 1 or 2 days. And then they maybe one day, and then they said, you have to stay in your cabins. And by then we, of course, knew that COVID was involved because, we had very good internet connections. Everybody knew everything about the situation. So we just didn't know how long it was going to last. But
they didn't know.
And nobody knew. Mm-hmm. The cruise line did the very best they could. We have absolutely no bad words about them at all. Mm-hmm. And when we finally were able to leave, they gave us the best treatment they could possibly do.
Yeah, in Texas.
Yeah, we were supposed to arrive in the United States to Fort Lauderdale, but the only state that would accept us at that point was Texas, and we flew to Dallas on a Portuguese
Brazilian.
TAM, a Brazilian airline. And when we got to Dallas, we were astonished at the treatment. They had a buffet set up for us because we hadn't really been able to eat very much on the airplane. And then they had a whole fleet of private jets sitting on the tarmac. And each group we're all Americans, of course. And each group of Americans was assigned to a different private jet, depending on where you lived. So I think there was one jet going to Florida.
Yeah.
And there were maybe 12 or 15 people on it. And it stopped. It was like a bus. They flew to Tampa, and then they flew to Miami, and then they flew us to
we were the last.
We were the last. They flew us to RSW for the Southwest Florida International. And they didn't fly us into the main terminal. They flew us into the private area, and there were limousines waiting for us. And the limousines took us home and then some weeks later, our luggage arrived.
So you left the situation with a pretty good feeling about Silversea.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That's why we have been back 3 times to their boats.
Yeah, we were on 2 more Silversea cruises since that.
Last year and this year.
Two last year and 2 this year.
Yeah.
And we're going on
next year.
Next year we'll be going on 1 more. No.
Yeah, 1 more, but then
next year's on Celebrity.
Nova.
Oh yes, we're at what?
We are going to do the trip in Brazil that from Rio to Fort Lauderdale.
The one that that was interrupted. We're going to do it again next year.
Yeah, but it's not the same thing. It's different.
This one is from Rio to Barbados.
Yeah, it's to Barbados, but they are going to go up to Manaus.
Yeah,
so it's different from last time.
So Doris, are you going to see your family again?
No, my sister came here in the summer, in the winter, in the summer, her summer.
Aren't we going to see your brother this time?
My brother, yes.
Yeah. So we'll stop in Bahia again.
Okay.
And we'll see him. And that's the only relatives we're going to see.
Yeah.
Now, is Silversea all suite?
Yes.
And all balcony?
All balcony suites. And I believe it's all butler service also.
So other than those folks who were on the side of the ship that faced the port, everyone kind of had pretty much the same. They were pretty satisfied as you could be with those accommodations.
I think the only difference among the levels on Silversea is the size of the suites.
Yeah, and they had people who went before us to the south. I mean, we knew the Americans will be out of it because the Europeans get out 2 days before, and then the
South America.
So we knew we are going to be able to go back to home
eventually.
Just pick a typical day during that time that you were trapped in paradise, and what was it like?
We usually get up in the morning around 7:30 or 8 o'clock, and because we still had room service available, we would order breakfast the night before, and it would be delivered. And then, obviously, we couldn't go anywhere, so we were. Doris was reading and I was writing.
Like home.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, in a way, it was like being at home because this is how we live at home. We would take
Except, do you have the nonstop lobster and filet mignon when you're
Oh,
at
yeah.
home?
no, not at home.
No, not at home. No.
We would work or read in the morning. Usually have a workout in the late morning. We couldn't get in the gym, of course, but we would just do whatever we could, abdominals and some aerobic exercise. And then we would have lunch delivered. And if the weather was good enough, I think the weather was pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
So we could eat lunch on the balcony. And then maybe, I know we'd probably work a little bit more. And then we usually had a nap in the afternoon. We had a cocktail hour and dinner, watched movies in the evening. So it was, as Doris says, it wasn't all that different from home,
No.
but we were just very restricted. You would think that in 12 days, you would get a little bit of cabin fever, but we're together 24/7 anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was not a hardship. I don't know if you want to use this in the interview, but we felt sorry for people who were on that cruise because they wanted to get away from each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be pretty tough.
Yeah, because there are, you go on cruises, you can tell there's some people who are eager to meet other people and have to talk to their spouse. And we thought a lot about people like that who were stuck with each other and they didn't want to be.
Out on your balcony, did you see or were you able to communicate with any neighbors?
No.
We didn't try, but we know people who did it.
Mm-hmm.
Passing things, and they needed to have people to communicate.
Yeah.
We didn't.
There were big partitions between the balconies, so it wasn't easy. But we heard that people who were in adjoining rooms who knew each other, especially, were passing cocktails back and forth and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. When you got on the planes to come home, or the jets to come home, I mean, you both seemed to take it in stride. How were, when you finally got a chance to interact with other passengers, were they pretty much okay, or was there a lot of stress, a lot of tension?
It was, Paul, it was very mixed. There were some people who, like us, were just sort of saying, well, this is the situation, and we're handling it. And there were other people that were clearly freaked out by it, especially because everybody at that point was wearing masks and gloves on their hands, because nobody was really sure how this was being transmitted.
But not us, darling. I mean, the people who are working in the airport in Recife.
Yeah, but when we got on the plane, we had to have masks on and latex gloves.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And in the bus from the ship to the airport, not only were we wearing masks and gloves, but there was a motorcycle escort of police surrounding the bus to make sure that it didn't stop anywhere that it wasn't supposed to stop.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, there were people. We had the feeling that some of the people who were a bit older than we are and maybe had some physical or cognitive problems seemed quite upset.
Right. I can.
Maybe they were in this part of the boat that looks
At the port.
the port. They can't be. I wouldn't be happy.
Yeah.
I would.
Yeah, that certainly couldn't help. So you got back to South Florida, and we survived the pandemic. How soon did you get back on the ocean?
Last year,
2022.
2022.
Okay.
In the spring of 2022.
So what was your first cruise back? Where'd you go?
That was the
what ship was it on?
To Europe.
That was the one we took from Fort Lauderdale to Lisbon.
Okay.
And from Lisbon to
That time it was Barcelona.
Barcelona.
Mm-hmm.
In 2022, we had two cruises again.
Mm-hmm.
First one was Lauderdale to Lisbon. Then we had a week in Lisbon.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second cruise from Lisbon to Barcelona. and then we went to Paris.
What were your highlights of your cruises post-pandemic? How many have you been on since the restart?
Four.
Four
on Silver Sea.
Oh, so they all were on Silver Sea.
Yes.
Kind of cruising that you do now, wonderful destinations and high-end ships. Did you grow into that, or did you, is that the kind of cruising you've always done, or did you start out on, what I call mass market cruise ships?
No, it was a time where I worked in the end of the year, and we took our bus back, the last bus available.
We took whatever cruise line was going when we needed to go.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been on, let's see, we've been on Crystal, Seabourn, Holland America, Regent,
Celebrity,
and Silver Sea. And in the years before I met Doris, I've been on Royal Caribbean. Oh, we were in an MSC cruise also.
Oh, yeah, with my sister and the girl.
A Caribbean cruise on MSC, which was a very large boat. When you talked about, you called it mass market.
Right.
That was
5,000 people.
Do you remember which MSC ship?
It was.
They were in the Caribbean, and we got the boat in Martinique.
Okay. Yeah.
And we came to Florida.
Okay. I was curious because I'm doing my first MSC cruise for Christmas, so we're going on the Meraviglia.
Uh-huh.
Well, they have everything on those cruises. It's enormous, and so they have all kinds of facilities, a lot of amenities.
Whatever you want.
Yep.
Want water slide, I'm sure they've got a water slide.
Yeah.
So what was your very first cruise?
Together?
No, individually.
And individually, it was mine.
Yeah.
It was a river cruise in Egypt, up to
the Nile.
The Nile, yeah.
Wow,
And
that's a nice first cruise.
Yeah. And it was Christmas.
Oh, okay.
They made a Christmas. It's you don't like Club Mediterranean, but they had a very beautiful Christmas in the middle of the desert.
Mm-hmm.
How it would happen? It was really beautiful.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna guess you fell in love with cruising right away.
When was the next one? Was that
the next was
together when we?
Yeah.
But you knew, Doris, after that first cruise, that's something that you would like to do again.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Oh sure.
How about you, Doug? What was your first cruise?
I think my first cruise was in the Caribbean on. It was either on Royal Caribbean or it was on. Anyway, it was. I knew nothing about cruising at that point. Back then, this would have been in the mid '80s.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, you really were given only the choice of a first or second seating.
Right.
And you were seated with whoever happened to be at your table
That day.
that day.
Right.
And so I didn't know about how you did anything. I didn't know how you could kind of personalize things. But I enjoyed it very much from the beginning.
So you knew right away this is something you might want to do again.
Oh yeah.
What do you have booked?
Well, now we have we have two cruises booked. The first one will be in February of 2024 from Rio to Barbados, Bridgetown in Barbados. Then
Is that on what line is that on?
that's Silver Sea.
Silver Seas, okay.
They're bringing their new boat called Silver Nova.
Silver Nova, okay.
Then in April, we'll take our bus to Europe. We're going to be on Celebrity Silhouette, which we've been on before, and Doris is crazy about that boat.
I love it.
It's much bigger than the Silver Sea boats. It's only all inclusive if you have certain level of cabin, but if you want to be, they have a wide price range, so you can get a nice accommodation that's not all inclusive, but it also isn't all that expensive either.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I think a 13-day 11 or 13.
Yeah, we cross, we go to Amsterdam. It will take a long time.
Doris and Doug, with all of the great luxury vessels you go on and stunning itineraries, what's on your travel bucket list? Cruise or other even land travel?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, we talk about this a lot. There are lots of places in the world where we know we don't want to go. And we've been, because of Doris, I've learned so much about the world and travel. We've been to most of the places that we're particularly interested in. At this stage of our lives, I think we've a tendency to go back to our favorite places rather than try anything that's too uncertain. For example, about 5 years ago, we flew out to Tahiti, and we took a cruise on Paul Gauguin around the islands of French Polynesia.
Wow.
It was, that's a once in a lifetime thing. And it was.
Don't go there.
When we came back, it was quite, it was quite expensive. And when we came back, we were glad we went. We wouldn't want to go again simply because of the length of time it took to get there and to get back. And the fact that much of what we saw was not that different from what you would experience in certain parts of the Caribbean, not the Bahamas, but in some other islands. The water is beautiful. Of course, the topography of the islands in French Polynesia was really impressive. And that's why I say I'm glad we went. It's not someplace we would go again. So I don't know that we really have a bucket list anymore. Our bucket is pretty full, and we're just kind of going back into it again.
Yeah, you're living it.
Yeah.
Not having a bucket list for the reasons you don't have one is a good problem to have.
No, we've been very, very lucky in all kinds of ways. And before I met Doris, I really didn't know much about the world outside the United States. I'd traveled my only cruising experience was in the Caribbean, and I had been a tourist in the UK, but I really didn't know Europe or South America. And so I've as a result of being with Doris and knowing about places we should go, I've really had a real education. This year, one place we are going that we've never been before is Lithuania. While we're in
next year.
Yeah, next year. I'm sorry. When we arrive in Amsterdam, we're going to fly to Vilnius in Lithuania and see that part of Europe, which neither of us have been to.
Before we let you go, a couple of light or fun, I hope, cruise questions, and then perhaps an oddball question that's not directly related to cruising. So the first one's kind of an easy one, just to give me some ideas. What's your favorite cruise drink and favorite cruise food?
The drink is easy. Champagne. Yeah, we like it very much.
And I recall from Cruising Interrupted, champagne was flowing quite freely when you were trapped in paradise.
They brought us a bottle every day.
Every day.
As far as food goes,
I think I like raw.
Yeah, Doris loves raw fish, sashimi,
raw fish,
sushi.
Yeah.
And boy, I'm very boring. I like chicken. I like steak. So a nice filet mignon makes me happy.
There you go. What's your most memorable? Well, first of all, besides the Trapped in Paradise, obviously that's the most memorable. What's your most memorable, or funny, or even most embarrassing cruise or port experience?
Most memorable.
And for me, it's very simple. It's the bar and the celebrity.
Oh yeah, the
I like it. I like it.
Celebrity Silhouette has what they call an ice bar. The bar itself, the counter
the counter.
is refrigerated. And so the surface of the bar is ice.
Yes.
If you drink down, it's cold. It stays cold. And the bartenders are the real showmen. They're throwing glasses and bottles out. They're juggling, doing all kinds of tricks with glasses and bottles. And we always enjoyed that very much. That was really memorable.
I was on the Celebrity Millennium in January, and they had ice bar. They had the ice top and all of that, and yeah.
That stands out in our memory.
My memory, at least.
Yeah. Boy, it's hard to narrow it down.
We like that place in Portugal, the island, the Azores.
The Azores.
Yeah. We like the stopping at the Azores when we came back. We came back from Europe and crossed the Atlantic. And we stayed at Azores, São Miguel. It was very nice.
Yeah, it's a very nice place. We were in the Caribbean. It seems to me in the Caribbean, one of my favorite memories was stopping at a port that was where a British, I think it was a P&O ship, very much a UK group, mostly drunken people. And we went ashore to have lunch, and all these drunken Brits were there having a great time, and we just enjoyed.
It was their last day vacation.
Last day of their vacation.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And it was very hot sun. And it was clear that they were going back to the UK where it was going to be cold and rainy. So they were all lying in the sun trying to get as much sunburn as they could. And it was like a big party. I remember that very well.
You all were Brits that day.
That day, everybody was.
Yeah.
The last question. I hope that you've invited friends and family to listen. Welcome to the folks Doris and Doug have brought to the Joy of Cruising podcast. Please come back. Share one thing that my listeners and your friends and family don't know about Doris and Doug.
They know everything.
I think they know everything. Oh, gosh.
You're speechless.
I can't think. Our lives tend to be open books.
Yeah.
We would have to ask them. I'm sorry, we can't come up with anything.
Well, that's okay. Doris and Doug, I recognize you are not cruise influencers or bloggers or anything like that. You're just passionate cruisers. And I appreciate that you took time out of your schedules to share with listeners a perspective of cruising that's not covered nearly as much as, what I refer to as mass market cruise lines. I will always hate the pandemic, but it did put us in a position to cross paths. So for that, I am thankful. All the best to you, and thank you for allowing me in your life to write about you and for being a guest on the Joy of Cruising podcast.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
And you all do such fantastic cruising that I'd love to have you back someday to talk about one of those. I was going to say a really special cruise, but they're all really special. But yeah, I'd love to have you back.
We'd be happy to be there.
Yeah.
All righty.
Okay.
As they say, I will see you on the ocean.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The Joy of Cruising and Cruising Interrupted, each $16.99 plus shipping, and new release, The Joy of Cruising Again for $18.99 can be ordered at the link on thejoyofcruisingpodcast.com. For each of the three books, use the discount code Joy of Cruising Podcast and get $4 off. The Joy of Cruising books are also available at Amazon. Order the ebook at Amazon or your favorite online retailer. Stay in touch by joining the Joy of Cruising Podcast Facebook group or following the Joy of Cruising Podcast on Instagram. We're constantly adding new shows. Please leave a review and tell a friend about us. We hope you enjoyed this brief escape to the ocean. See you next week.